thing. And it was late, and everybody was tired, but it was great. Listen, we're going to do three things. The audio portion of this...
First of all, we're going to roast.
Right.
It's warm. It suddenly got very warm.
You want Paul to go with this one?
If you could, just a touch. Just a bit that way, Paul.
I like the shirt.
Ace like it.
The audio portion is going to be on my radio show tomorrow. We're going to take a news bite out of this for WGN News. They're a superstation. But this is also going to be on a syndicated show called Rocker with a young lady that I think you know, Paula Yates. Paula is going to be the hostess of this show. It's like a magazine format where we talk about sort of like
excuse me, is there any way these lights can come down a little bit in heat?
But it's
Just
so bright
say no.
outside. No.
Just say no.
Well, what's that?
I might have got it.
Having a good time?
Are we ready, Sound?
Having a good time?
Yes, all right.
Everybody ready?
So we're going to do a whole lot of things.
Cameras rolling?
All right, let's go.
Roy, it's all yours. Have a good time.
There's a marvelous scene in Give My Regards to Broad Street in which we see this kind of ragtag, decrepit former rock star standing in front of a subway station singing a Beatles song called Yesterday with this perfectly awful skiffle rhythm, hoping that people will throw money into his guitar case. I just kind of wondered if at any time, especially in the early career of Paul McCartney, if he thought he might be there someday in reality.
I was there.
Were
Yeah,
you
I used to. Yeah, we used to do sort of similar things to that, you know, once. And I think when you get famous, you remember that you used to do that, you know, and you get a little bit removed from the people on the street, obviously, when you closeted off in hotels and stuff. And I just said to the director of the film, I said, I'd really love to do that, you know, I'd love to just get out in the West End and just go and busk. And he said, I've got just the moment where we could work it in, you know, because the moment at the end, as you mentioned, where I imagine all is lost. Can dissolve to the busking scene. And so they dropped me off in the West End of London. Kind of just made me look a bit like a street musician and stuff. I took my old guitar, and they dropped me off, and for about 5 minutes I was a little bit embarrassed, expecting people to recognize me and stuff. They didn't. There was only one fella that recognized me. He was a punk. He turned out to be American. Are you Paul McCartney? I said, are you kidding? You know, but so it was fine, really. After those 5 minutes, I started to get quite cocky, and I started to really try and attract attention, because, you know, they weren't looking. It was great fun, actually. I was out there for about an hour. Nobody really recognized me.
Did you decide what song you were going to sing and how you were going to sing it?
Yeah, I just thought, you know, if I'm going to be out there, you've got to keep it pretty breezy, you know, because this is live. And so I decided to just do this version of Yesterday. And also in the film, we'd set it up earlier on. I'd done a kind of proper version of it. So we thought, you know, it had worked that way. I like those crummy versions with bad chords, you know. It's a bit like, was it Joe Stafford used to do all that stuff?
Sure. Joe Stafford used to sing You Belong to Me.
Out of tune and stuff. I used to love that.
It would seem to me that Paul McCartney has tried maybe in the past few years to go out of his way to diminish the Beatle image. I mean, that's all something in the past. Now we're talking about Paul McCartney. And yet, in Give My Regards to Broad Street, you use a lot of Beatles songs.
Yeah. I think in the beginning, when the Beatles broke up, it was a bit like a divorce, or what I imagine a divorce would be like. And as much as you don't want to know anything about the other people. You know, you want to leave your old life behind, you want to get on with your new life, you want to make a fresh start. But with something like the Beatles, of course, you can't, because no one else is going to forget, even if you do. It's a bit like Greta Garbo saying, I want to be alone. You know, well, tough is the sort of the world's answer to that, really, you know, because the newspapers are still going to be there if she's on the beach, click, click. So it really, what happened was that impression of me wanting to turn my back on the Beatles was largely formed, I think, immediately after the breakup. Now that it's kind of over 10 years, it's over 15 years since we broke up, do you believe? Obviously time heals and stuff, and you just look back on that situation and think, well, it wasn't all bad, and it was just the pain of the breakup that made me think that. But now I've got over all of that, and I just thought it'd be a bit sad if I never sing those songs again. And just because there was some painful memories back then, the songs shouldn't have to carry the blame.
In re-recording things like Eleanor Rigby and No One, which, by the way, was never a single.
For No One?
For No One.
No. That was the case in point. I mean, that's the only time I've ever sung that song, the record of it, because I'd write it,
Right.
go into the recording studio, record it once, and then I never happened to do that one on stage. So, like, 20 years later, I sort of think, oh, I'd like to sing that one again. It shouldn't just.
As you re-recorded these songs, were there some painful memories about what had happened the first time? Well, for instance, did you think of John at all?
Well, not actually during most of the re-recording of the songs. There was, because in actual fact, these ones, what I did here was choose songs that weren't particularly written with John. Out of all the Lennon McCartney songs, we wrote a lot of them separately. We always put Lennon McCartney on it, but just because we split everything down the middle anyway. But a lot of songs like Yesterday, John actually didn't really have anything to do with. Eleanor Rigby had little to do with. Probably the main moment when I was re-recording stuff, when I was doing Good Day Sunshine. And I decided to really copy the Beatle record down to the last little thing, and there was a little ad-lib that John had done. I kind of sang, "She feels good," and John had gone, "She feels good." And I kind of copied that on the record. I must admit, obviously, I had to have some fond memories of him when I did that little bit.
There is a little corner in the Paul McCartney mind that is almost a memorial to Busby Berkeley. Do you know who Busby Berkeley was? But I mean, you've got ballroom dancing in the film, and look back to the television show, Gotta Sing, Gotta Dance. Think back to, what, Honey Pie, and You Gave Me the Answer, When I'm 64. Where did this influence come from?
My dad, basically, and movies as a kid. I was kind of raised on black and white movies, Fred Astaire, all those old movies. And I'm a big fan of Fred Astaire's. I mean, still, some of those dance sequences and Top Hat and things like that, Cheek to Cheek. I love him singing Cheek to Cheek. It's one of my favourite records of all time. I just love that, but as I say, my dad was probably the one who solidified it, because he used to play piano. He taught himself and that, he used to be in a band. He used to play piano and trumpet till his teeth gave out, and he just stuck with the piano. And, all the parties, like, he'd be there, and he always used to tell me, learn to play the piano, son, because you get invited to a lot of parties.
You mentioned your dad. I was interviewing Philip Norman recently, who wrote Shout, and he's recently...
Norman Phillips, you mean? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, he'd recently written this book about Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. And in the book, he does recount a couple of conversations that you supposedly had with Mick Jagger, in which you gave Mick some advice about maybe treating his elders in a different way, or with a little more respect. Do you recall those at all?
Yeah, it wasn't so much respect, I wouldn't have the nerve to tell him to sort of respect his parents. Really, all I said was, I've always been lucky because I had a good relationship with my parents, and it was always very easy. There was never really a generation gap. But at that time, Mick had kind of, not fallen out with them, but he just didn't really see much of them. And I think all I really said was, watch out, because they're going to get old one of these days. They're going to not be here, and you're going to wish that they were. And I sort of said, try and get them with it and stuff. I know he kind of sees a lot of them these days, so I don't know whether my advice had anything to do with it.
Naturally, you hope that your children will feel the same way.
Sure do.
Are they going to get into music? Or if they want to get into music, will you encourage it, discourage it?
I would encourage them to get into music, but not too early an age. I think there's a big danger that if one of my kids, are pretty young at the moment, but if when they're 16 or something, some kind of age when I feel like they could handle it, they wanted to go into music, then I really would encourage them. And they are quite musical. They all can sing in tune, and they've got a good sense of rhythm and stuff. But I wouldn't like them to become child stars. I don't think it's too healthy.
Have you heard Julian Lennon's single song?
Yeah.
He sounds an awful lot like his dad.
He sounds very like his dad, yeah. I think the thing I heard, before I heard the record, I heard people saying, it sounds just like his dad and stuff. And I was a little worried that it would just be a kind of singer-like, sounder-like thing. That it'd be sort of cashing in. In actual fact, I was very pleasantly surprised. I think this voice has got a really good quality. I mean, I think the John things obviously are... he means to do a little bit of an impression of his dad, I'm sure. But I think that in there, if you listen to the actual quality of his voice, I think it sounds very strong to me.
I haven't had a chance to ask you this, and I just thought of it the other day. I was going through some rock almanac where they tell what happened on what date, and it was on this date in some year that the Beatles opened for Little Richard in England. And you opened for Little Richard a lot. There's been a rumor going around for years that Little Richard taught Paul McCartney how to whale. And we've got to, I mean, remember Long Tall Sally and She Loves You and those. Did he?
Well, not She Loves You. I've got to stop you then. I said Tutti Frutti, Long Tall Sally, that's what you meant to say,
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Do you want to do that again?
All right.
No, Long Tall Sally, Tutti Frutti.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, no, the thing is, in the same way we were talking about Julian doing an impression of his dad, I started off doing an impression of Little Richard. My kind of screamy voice that I use on a few records with the Beatles was actually a Little Richard impression, first off, yeah. What used to happen is the last day of school, it used to be a kind of free day when you're allowed to bring guitars and stuff, so a couple of us did, and we'd stand up on the desks, all the other kids would go, yeah, we'd go, wow, and wail a bit, you know. And when we got to Hamburg later and met Richard, we did kind of sit at the feet of the master a bit, you know, because he's a great guy. He's a complete nutcase, but he's a lovely man.
You can still whale.
Yeah, I can, so can he.
You say that Give My Regards to Broad Street is sort of a day in the mind of a rock star. Can you tell us what a day in the life of a real rock star like Paul McCartney is, when you're not writing, when you're not recording?
I suppose it'd be a pretty average kind of day, really. I like to spend a lot of time with the kids, just because I like them, you know, they're like the cabaret for me, the kids. You know, they always come up with something new, they're inventive and stuff. So I like to do that. I spend time in the country. I like the country a lot, countryside. I'm a big fresh air freak. I like animals and nature and stuff, so I like to hear all birds singing and stuff. I'm very comfortable with that. I like doing a little bit of horse riding. Not much, a little bit of gardening.
We talked a little bit about Philip Norman's book. Peter Brown's got a book. There have been a lot of books written.
They've all
about-
got books.
Yeah. Have you read any of them?
I burned a couple.
All right, to set the record straight, are you ever going to put it down?
I don't know, really. It's just never really occurred to me until recently, when I started to realize that I'm going to forget it soon. You know, because 20 years is not a long, you know, it's not easy to remember all the facts. So I suppose, you know, I might, in the next couple of years, just put it down just to remember it all, more than anything. I haven't got any desire to really be a autobiographical novelist.
But you'd like to set the record straight.
Well, I would like to set the record straight. I'd like to put down my version in some way, yeah. But it's not a big ambition, really. But I might do.
Is there one big misconception about the Beatles, about Paul McCartney?
I think there's a few big misconceptions, really. I can't think what they are just now. You know, there's always something somebody writes in an article and you think, oh, if you only knew me, you know, he'd know I'm not like that. This Norma Phillips, I refer to Philip Norman as Norma Phillips. It's just a little joke of mine. People say it's childish, but I will have my way. He wrote some stuff in his book. He kind of casts me as like the villain, a ruthless, ambitious person who's kind of going to put anyone down just to claw his way to the top, you know. Well, that's a little bit Dallas, you know, it's all a bit JR. I think we're probably as ambitious as each other. I certainly wasn't the only ambitious person in the group.
Well, Peter Brown pictures you as being somewhat self-centered.
Yes, well, you don't want me to tell you on nationwide television what I think of him.
You can if you wish.
Stinks.
All right. What is the most frustrating thing about having to be Paul McCartney?
Again, there's quite a few things. The single most frustrating thing could well be having to put up with books being released about you by guys who you know are just going to rip you off. They just want money. The guy we were just talking about actually came round and promised everyone, you know, everyone would get to see the book. It was all going to be wonderful, and we invited him into our homes. We showed him the kids, did the whole bit. I mean, boy, did we do the bit. Because he used to be a friend. Because he schleps back to America and does the dirty on you, you know. You're at risk for that kind of stuff. All you can really do is just say, well, I'm not talking to him again. You know, but it's not really a sort of much revenge, really. You'd like to get a couple of glasses of orange juice or something, you know, one morning.
Paul, what would you most like to be remembered for?
Good music.
The last time we talked was 1976, during the Wings tour. And I got the impression when you left the stage, you said, see you next time, or something to that effect. We all felt it would be like a couple of years. It's been 8 years.
Yeah.
There are, look, I've got 6 kids, 29 to 18. They want to see Paul McCartney. They are as much into you and your music as I was and as the generation before me was. They want to see you in person. Will you ever tour again?
Yeah, I've been asked that quite a bit, you know, on this promotion tour, and I'd like to. In truth, I've been taken up with this movie for a little while, so I haven't been able to. But during the movie, we did a lot of stuff on the sound stages that we were playing live a lot. And when they weren't filming, we'd play for the crew and stuff with whatever lineup we had. And I enjoyed it a lot, so it kind of reminded me that I do like to get out there. I think the disadvantage is, if you're honest, that you've got to actually go and traipse around the world with your big retinue and kind of from hotel to hotel. And that gets wearing after a while for everyone. You know, nobody, I haven't met anyone who really likes that.
But you've had some fascinating
Right,
experiences.
I'm going to have to tag this now, because power is greater than myself.
Okay, can I ask one final question?
Yeah.
Are the songs in Give My Regards to Broad Street the best of McCartney? Is that why they were chosen?
No, they were chosen for various reasons. Some were chosen for reasons of plot, like Yesterday to set up the busking scene at the end. Some were chosen because they were purely visual, good visually, like Ballroom Dancing lends itself very easily to visual. Some were chosen because I think they're amongst the best. I find it difficult to choose what is the best because I don't really analyze myself as much as other people do. I just get on with it and write it. But for No One and Here, There and Everywhere, I do like as songs. Yesterday I like as a song. So the answer is they were chosen for all sorts of different reasons.
And are you worried about what the critics are going to say?
Me? Worried about critics? Yes. I'm too human.
Thanks.
Come wide, Tom. Paul, if you'll sit for just a second, so we can tag
Sure.
this.
Say when.
And Paul, if you look at Roy, okay, Roy, I'm counting backwards into you. Ready, Tom?
Yeah.
3, 2, whenever, Roy.
Roy Leonard with Paul McCartney for Rocker.
Poetry.
Did the frame okay?
Wonderful.
Did the frame
Love
okay,
it.
Tom?
Yeah, I mean, we can do it again.
You all set?
We go downstairs.
For No One. I'm so
Thanks, sir.
glad you put that in. Well, I've always loved the song.
Great. My little daughter, well, one of my daughters, she said, I love that song, Dad. Is it a new one?
For
I've
now.
never heard it.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the film, really. It's fun.
Good, man.
Good.
Thank you, Paul. Same here. Enjoy
Cheers.
the film, too.
Well, I'll tell you what, can we cool these lights a little bit? Is it possible?
You're not here anymore.
Yes, yes.
Oh, I
yes,
know.
come
Oh,
on.
you're doing another one.
It
Okay.
really is pretty.
Yes.
It's okay if we just could cool it a little bit.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Roy, we need to do reversals.
Sure, you say when.